Had a dream about you last night.
What happened?
Someone walked me home. I think it was you.
And then eventually, everything came crashing down.
You can't just keep running. You're gonna end up in jail.
Brandon, what's going on?
You want the truth, don't you? There were time bombs waiting to explode.
He's got her brainwashed.
We can work this out.
You know, we do liars.
Fox Searchlight Pictures presents a story about the courage to be yourself.
This is a story of love and acceptance and being who you really are with all of your heart and every cell in your body being who you are and not conforming to what it is other people think you should be.
So what are you gonna tell them?
I'm gonna tell them what they want to hear. I'm gonna tell them what we know is true.
Difference.
You freak!
When it gets out in a small town, can be a matter of life or death.
Oh. You are not a boy. That is what went wrong. You are not a boy.
Tell them that. They say I'm the best boyfriend they ever had.
Brandon Teena's complicated life inspired the Golden Globe-winning film Boys Don't Cry and the documentary The Brandon Teena Story, parts of which help tell our story.
Brandon was a woman's man. I mean, every woman's dream. Good kisser. Knew exactly how a woman wanted to be treated.
Brandon was the perfect boyfriend.
He knew how to please you. He knew how to do everything right.
But there was something these young girls didn't know.
I thought Brandon was attractive when I thought it was Brandon until I found out Brandon's Teena.
The charming and handsome Brandon was really Teena Brandon, and Teena was a girl. Her story begins innocently enough. Born Teena Renee Brandon in December 1972 in Lincoln, Nebraska. Her mother, Joanne, a widow, raised Teena and her older sister Tammy on her own.
She was the best baby anybody could ever ask for. And as she was growing up, she was ornery and full of life, and she was a prankster, and she was a tomboy.
But Teena wasn't just a tomboy. She felt like a boy in a girl's body. She was increasingly confused, and as a teenager, began experimenting in unusual ways.
She started using a sock to stuff her pants.
And with that sock in her pants, a transformation occurred. She switched her name and began calling herself Brandon Teena. And to her family's surprise, began dating local girls, the bulge in her pants helping to convince them she was a boy. Did you ever acknowledge this person, Brandon?
No.
You refused to acknowledge her as a man. And she would present herself as a boy to other girls.
Right. But when they came around to our house, she was spoken to as Teena. So they knew, even though they denied it
to themselves and others. Some of the girls were even physically intimate with Brandon. When I heard that, I wondered how Brandon was able to pull it off.
I'm going to stand right here until you're safe inside, okay?
The movie Boys Don't Cry answered my question, suggesting that Brandon bound her breasts and used a prosthetic device. But eventually, some girls would learn the truth, and when they did, their bewilderment and conflicted feelings would prompt heated arguments.
And he would just scream at me saying, you know, Gina, this isn't a gay relationship. I don't know what you're thinking. I said, well, what am I supposed to think? I mean, I know what you want to be as male. I said, but unfortunately, we have to deal with what we have now. And I said, you are female.
But Brandon didn't want to be female, and these kinds of fights only underscored the feeling of hopelessness. Brandon wrote a poem about it.
Changes I'm going through in my life will change me forever. Soon I'll have anybody I want and give them the love that I have. I'm not as strong as I thought. I can't fight. I don't think I can make it alone. By Brandon.
Imagine what it's like to be confused about something as fundamental as your gender and to be living in rural America, living in a place where issues of sexuality can bring out the most primitive reactions in people. Joanne Fleming was a family friend.
Every time he tried to be truthful to the kids he was with, he was put down. He was called a fag, or worse yet, oh, you're a dyke, or you're really a lesbo. Or the girls would just look at him and call him a freak.
When the humiliation and name-calling became too much, Brandon attempted suicide. Best friend Sarah Lyons brought Brandon to a crisis center.
just came up and she's just like, I'm so confused. I don't know if I'm gay. I don't know what I am. And she goes, I don't want you to hate me.
In counseling, Brandon discussed the possibility of a sex change operation, but never had one. There were more immediate problems that went beyond the gender identity crisis.
She started forging checks, but she would only forge them to give the girls gifts and stuff.
Brandon was stealing, and by the end of 1993 was charged with 18 counts of theft and forgery. Also by that time, most folks in Lincoln had learned the truth.
Straight girls would be, oh, I was making out with a girl, oh. And then the phone calls and the harassment would start. And that's when Teena finally left.
Left to a place where Teena didn't exist, to the more remote town of Falls City, hoping to be just Brandon.
He shaved. He would like sit like a man, and he would, talk about women, like pretty women on TV.
Brandon spotted Lana Tisdale at a local bar, and they soon started dating.
It was really nice being treated like a lady instead of just like nothing, like dirt.
But with Lana came a rough crowd, including an old boyfriend, the hard-drinking John Lauder, who was also a violent ex-convict.
Lana introduced me to, and they were seeing each other, supposedly dating each other. And
we went out drinking together. We talked about women.
Lauder and his good friend Tom Neeson, another ex-con, were totally taken in by Brandon. They became drinking buddies and cruised for girls together.
We'd ride around and say, ooh, what about that one? What about that one there, just guy talk.
Now Brandon had it all, respected as a man with an attractive girlfriend. The only thing missing? Money. So once again, Brandon stole, and this time was arrested for check forgery. When police charged Brandon as a female, word got out.
What? Like, yes, it is a woman, not a man. I'm like, there's no way. I said, that is not a woman. I said, it don't even look like a woman.
Lana refused to believe it and bailed Brandon out of jail just before Christmas.
I said, I'm going to tell them what we want them to know and what we believe. I walked out there and I said, he is a man. They said, did you see it? And I said, yes, I seen it in the flesh. I said, that is a full man. And I'll leave him alone.
But they didn't, and they didn't believe Lana either. They were furious.
Are you a girl or are you not? There's a real easy way to solve this problem.
The movie captures some of the rage that Lauder and Neeson must have felt. Two unsophisticated men from a small town, duped about the gender of someone they thought was a buddy.
All right.
On Christmas Eve, Neeson and Lauder violently ripped off Brandon's pants to prove to Lana and everyone else that Brandon was really a girl.
Tom was pulling down her pants, and he put his finger up there and said, oh, this, there's something, there ain't nothing there. She's a girl,
And so I turned around, and I had my eyes like this, and I turned around, and I peeked a little bit.
Brandon was exposed and humiliated and would later tell authorities what happened next. In the early morning hours of Christmas Day, Neeson and Lauder drove Brandon here to this Hormel plant. It's a place where hogs are loaded, and it reeks of urine and manure. At night, it's dark and deserted. Here, Lauder and Neeson decided to teach Brandon, now exposed as Teena Brandon, a lesson for posing as a man. Back here, in the bitter cold, they beat her until she was bloody. Then they each took turns raping her. And then they beat her again. Then they warned Brandon not to tell anyone, but Brandon did tell.
She called you and said, Mom, I was raped?
Yes, and I said, do you know who it was? And she said, yes, and I'm going to file charges.
And Brandon did just that. But amazingly, no arrests were made. The sheriff, Charles Locks, was less than sympathetic.
So when they got ready to poke you, how was your position in the back seat? On my back. When they tried
Sheriff Locke seemed less interested in the crime than in the oddness of the victim sitting before him.
Why do you run around with girls instead of guys, being you're a girl yourself? Why do you make girls think you're a guy?
Because I have a sexual identity crisis.
You what?
I have a sexual identity crisis.
You want to explain that?
I don't know if I can even come back.
The sheriff's department did question Nissen and Lauder a few days later, but neither man was charged, and the fact that Brandon even reported the rape enraged them. John Lauder and Tom Nissen plotted revenge.
Brandon Teena was now in fear for her life. She asked a friend to take her in and hide her from Tom Nissen and John Lauder. When we come back, a safe house invaded and friends in the wrong place. The dramatic conclusion to our story.
I was in tears and bargaining with God all night long. I didn't want it to be true.
The Brandon Teena story continues. Once again, Jamie Floyd.
Brandon Teena was a young woman living her life here in rural Nebraska, transgendered, dressing, dating, loving, living as a man. But when two male friends discovered Brandon was biologically a she and not a he, they brutally beat and raped Brandon on Christmas Day 1993. They weren't arrested, and Brandon's life was in danger. Brandon took refuge here at friend Lisa Lambert's farmhouse in Humboldt. Lisa and her 8-month-old baby boy also opened their home to Phillip Devine, who was visiting from Iowa. In this conservative community, they were three misfits: Lisa, a single mom; Phillip, a black man in a nearly all-white town; and Brandon, even more of an outcast. Brandon was hiding from John Lauder and Tom Nissen, who were looking for revenge after Brandon reported them for rape.
On the 26th of December until the morning of the 27th, John Lauder and Tom Nissen sat out behind my home, waiting to see if she was there.
The two men were looking everywhere for Brandon, and Nissen would later describe their chilling plan to take care of Brandon Teena.
To discuss how we were going to kill her.
Yes.
What was that discussion?
To chop her hands and her head off.
Why are we going to do that?
In order that the body couldn't be identified.
Finally, in the early morning hours of New Year's Eve 1993, they found Brandon at the farmhouse.
John Lauder proceeded to kick the door 3 times. I noticed on the floor at the foot of the bed, there was a blanket covering that looked like a person. I reached down and moved the blanket, and Teena Brandon was on the floor.
Nissen would later testify that after he forced Brandon to stand, Lauder fired a shot at point-blank range. Brandon fell back on the bed.
You have some impression that she wasn't yet dead?
Yes. She was twitching.
Can you tell me what you did to ensure that she's dead?
I stabbed her.
But there were witnesses. Lisa Lambert and Phillip Devine, two people in the wrong place at the wrong time. And despite their pleas, they were shot and killed. Only Lisa's baby boy was spared.
A relative discovered the murder victims Friday on this farmstead south of Humboldt. The victims were Teena Brandon of Lincoln, Phillip Devine of Fairfield, Iowa, and Lisa Lambert of Humboldt.
On New Year's Eve, I heard that there was a triple homicide in Humboldt, Nebraska. And I kept trying to call the farmhouse and nobody would answer. I was in tears and bargaining with God all night long. I didn't want it to be true.
Tom Nissen and John Lauder were arrested and charged with the murders. They were tried separately in 1995. Both were facing the electric chair. But after his conviction, Nissen cut a deal, turned on Lauder, and testified against him.
What do you think of Harmon Nissen?
He's a little liar.
Nissen got life in prison.
Defendant John L. Lauder is hereby sentenced to the penalty of death for the murder of Teena Brandon.
Lauder sits on death row. But for Joanne Brandon, justice was not yet complete. She says her daughter suffered indignity not only at the hands of her attackers, but also at the hands of the Falls City Sheriff.
I think he hated my daughter so much that he didn't care what happened to her. He just left her hanging out there.
Joanne Brandon filed a $1 million wrongful death suit against Sheriff Locks and Richardson County.
Anywhere else, had you reported a rape, they would have arrested him on the spot.
Locks declined all interviews, but in this never-before-seen footage of his deposition in the wrongful death suit, he admits his disregard for Brandon.
Did you believe Teena Brandon when she told you she'd been raped?
I questioned it a little bit, probably.
And why did you question it?
Because she was posing as a man.
There was ample probable cause at that time that these two young men had raped this girl, wasn't there? And you refused to arrest them. You should have, shouldn't you?
Probably.
The judge in the civil case found Sheriff Locks and Richardson County liable in the death of Brandon Teena, legally Teena Renee Brandon, but said their responsibility amounted to only $17,000. Joanne Brandon is appealing. In death, Brandon Teena found support and acceptance never known in life. The transgendered community were among those that mourned the loss of a young person first scorned, then violated, dehumanized, and ultimately murdered for being different.
This was a person. This was somebody's sister, somebody's daughter, somebody's friend.
And while many remember the charming young man, Brandon Teena, a mother remembers her child.
That's the way I knew her all her life, was Teena Brandon. Whichever way they want to remember her, I don't care, just as long as somebody remembers her.